The NFL draft is almost here. Would the Bengals consider trading Trey Hendrickson to get extra picks? We'll explore that topic. Plus, we'll discuss who they've brought into Cincinnati for pre-draft visits, the latest on the stadium, and much, much more right now on Enter the Jungle. Hi again, everyone, and welcome into Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He is Andrew Fox Miller. Make sure that you check us out every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern right here on the YouTube channel Cincinnati Bengals Talk weekly on FanDuel Sports Network. And Andrew, the NFL draft is next week, and that's really exciting. It's exciting for a bunch of reasons. It's also an artificial deadline, and it's an artificial deadline for Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson was given permission to seek a trade earlier this offseason. He's voiced his frustrations. The Bengals have, through back channels and even front channels, come out and said that they want to pay Trey Hendrickson and keep him here long term. Could you see them entertaining a trade between now and the draft? Because the draft is that artificial deadline where if they're going to get something done and send Trey elsewhere, they're going to want picks or a pick or picks in this year's draft.
I mean, look, it feels very not Bengals to trade him, especially at this point, after everything that has led up to this point. Now, since we're just going to go for big swings here and entertain the idea, I do want to point out, you mentioned picks. Like, obviously, there's a lot of scenarios here when you're talking about trading Trey Hendrickson. Like, the output from these scenarios that I've seen, like these mock drafts, and there are just a lot of, again, big swings I found, at least. I think if I were to keep it simple, in my very humble opinion, for this draft, 2025 NFL draft, I'm not as focused on getting early, like round one picks. I want as many picks as possible during the first 2 days of the draft. So however we accomplish that, obviously acquiring an established, reliable player at a position of need from another team in a trade would be ideal, in addition to adding draft picks. You do that, and James, let's hope that Myles Murphy is, him kicking his cereal habit in the morning makes a difference. If we can do all that, for those that read the Jeff Hobson article.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
In the Myles Murphy, because I don't want to get too much into that.
Yeah.
Like, he did one with Andre Yosavash. He did one with Myles Murphy, and it's like, let's save that for after the draft when I really want to talk to these guys and get. But DJ Reader once upon a time kicked the cereal habit when it was the Bengals' big signing in free agency, and that certainly helped him have a successful Bengals run. Who knows? Maybe Myles Murphy's onto something there. Maybe the Clemson product is following the Clemson ways of DJ Reader, and that opens the door. But look, regardless, you and I both agree, long shot that they trade Trey Hendrickson, especially at this point. I felt that way all along throughout this process. I think their goal is to sign him. But you make a good point. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a first-round pick. If I'm the Bengals, I don't necessarily need a first-round pick for Trey because, to be quite honest, none of these edge rushers, everyone's going to talk about Mike Green or James Pierce Jr. Those guys aren't replacing Trey Hendrickson.
Of course.
And that's just, it's not going to happen. So what would make sense? Well, if you get a second-round pick and a third-round pick and you're moving that salary off the books and you have a deal with Zadarius Smith that you can get done with some of that money, and you can use some of that money and get Brandon Scherf. And now you have a second and third round pick, and then you have an edge rusher that can heat up the passer a little bit on a 1-year deal. And you're not committing long-term money to a guy that you've certainly been hesitant to reach his contractual needs. Like, you can paint the picture, but there's just so many areas that need to be painted and addressed for it to make sense. When you could just pay Trey, keep Trey happy.
Right.
He's one of these high-end players. You're hoping you find a Trey Hendrickson next week. Hoping. One. Well, you haven't. And so why not pay him? I think that's how the Bengals view it. Now, the other element here, and this is where I get to have a little fun.
Cool.
Let's say Lou Anarumo really has some pull in Indianapolis now. And he says, I want Trey Hendrickson. And they say, we're going to get you Trey Hendrickson. And they call and they say, hey, we're going to give you Quentin Nelson for Trey Hendrickson. And we also want a draft pick back. We want your 4th round pick back Quentin Nelson's under contract for multiple years. He's an all-pro guard in exchange for Trey Hendrickson. What do you do, Andrew?
I think I like the scenario where we could get some established veteran guards. If we like the Scherf, that whole situation where you're getting guys that are able to, they don't have to be all pros, just be average. If you give me 2 average, and then draft for depth, I would take that swap. I would really consider taking that swap for the money. Now, you mention hitting in the draft. It's that, trusting the Bengals to do it, not to pile on them here, but let's just be realistic. I mean, the odds seem to work against them a lot of times, especially when they really need a particular position and not reach, but they spend a premium pick on that position. Odds are you're not going to get what you lost. It's just how it is. On top of that, you free up that extra salary, your cap, you've got some more space. Do we trust that the Bengals are going to use that and allocate it appropriately to grab some players in position of need? We've seen it before. I don't know. You talk about painting a picture, but yeah, there's a lot of things that need to line up, and I just feel like historically it doesn't work out just as much as we would like for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think it's something I covered on Monday on this channel. There are scenarios where you could go with a non-huge need, non-guard, non-edge rusher, and you take a safety, you take a tight end, you take a linebacker, and those are needs, but they don't feel as big. There's a reason people are talking about pass rush and protecting Joe. And you do that, and you're still able to get good players at those positions throughout the draft. But you have to be able to navigate this the right way and evaluate it the right way. And the margins become thinner and the pressure grows. And that's where it's at when you talk about trading Trey now. Like, let's just say you traded Trey for a first-round pick, with just one first-round pick, and you take James Pierce Jr. Do you know how much pressure would be on James Pierce Jr. the moment he walks in the building? Like, that's the part of the value that, like, for years people have said, oh, well, trade T and just draft a receiver. Do you know how much pressure a receiver would have? Like, there isn't a T. Higgins in this draft. Not one. And outside Travis Hunter, but you're obviously not getting him. So can you imagine doing that? Like, that's such an impossible thing. The Titans did it a few years ago with A.J. Brown, and it's just really, really hard to pull off. Now, the Vikings did it and made it work, but it's just really hard to do. And so when you look at it with Trey Hendrickson, it's like, man, I keep coming back to, well, you're in a Super Bowl window. Just pay him. Just get it done. And who knows? Maybe they'll get it done. Regardless, though, I think you and I both agree that they have to get it done on draft day. Draft day is next week, and it's, 3 days. All 3 draft days they need to get right. We'll discuss what they're eyeing, what their pre-draft visits say about their strategy, and much, much more coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien, and the Bengals, well, they are eyeing defensive linemen, which is music to, all of Cincinnati and Bengals fans everywhere. They brought in a bunch of day 2 defensive tackles, day 1 defensive tackles, if you want to look at Walter Nolan, but high-end defensive tackles that they could be eyeing in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft. TJ Sanders, a projected second-round pick, was in town on Tuesday. Omar Norman-Lott as well has been in town. Walter Nolan, a projected first-round pick, was in town on a pre-draft visit. And Ty Robinson, who's probably one of my favorite under-the-radar potential targets, Andrew, someone that they could get in round 4, most likely at pick 119, certainly round 3, but probably round 4, another guy that they've brought in on a pre-draft visit. So if anything, their minds are where Bengals fans' minds are, which is beefing up the trenches.
Beefing up for sure. I mean, a lot of these guys, I was kind of looking through some of them as they were doing those visits. They kind of fit that mold of what the Bengals go for. Like you mentioned Ty Robinson, right? That's a guy that totally makes sense as a Bengals prospect. 6'5", high motor. Sometimes that works against him, but I like the urgency from what I'm seeing, what I'm reading. A rotational guy, I guess. But, I should mention this. Of the defensive tackles, and I'm sure you know this, James, given a relative athletic score so far ahead of this year's draft, Ty Robinson currently sits at number 1, 9.89 out of 10. So there's going to be some thirst there for Ty Robinson.
For sure. I think so. Like my ideal draft, which I'll reveal at some point, certainly very much could involve Ty Robinson. And that's what I think the Bengals are doing with these visits is you see the Walter Nolan visit round 1. Who knows about Derek Harmon? You know, that they may say, yeah, we're giving him the thumbs up round 1 as well. We just don't have the questions that we had about him with Walter Nolan that we had. Like a lot of these pre-draft visits, yeah, they do show interest. And last year they brought in Amarius Mims for a pre-draft visit after meeting with him at the combine. Same thing with Walter Nolan. They do it with a lot of their targets. If there's any questions, any thoughts, any medicals, any character stuff, anything. But it also, they're not afraid to show you, all right, well, this is what we're looking at. And so I think it's a very real possibility here that they get a defensive tackle, certainly within the first 4 rounds, maybe sooner. Maybe it just is round 1. I could also see edge going round 1. And they did that. They brought in James Pierce Jr. for a 30 visit at edge. I've mentioned him a couple times. Would they be in on him at 17 overall? Is he a trade down candidate? I wonder, but I look at what they've done, and even with the guard position, they've looked at a lot of these guards on day 2 that they would potentially target in rounds 2 or 3. I think they're preparing to really bolster the trenches. You never know how the board is going to fall. You don't know what it's going to look like exactly. I'm thinking about where everyone, like I've been asked about this, like anywhere and everywhere, I'm asked about the trenches. And the Bengals are clearly looking at the trenches. Whether or not they get it right in the trenches, whole nother topic. But they are looking at the trenches. They're clearly aware of their deficiencies, of their weaknesses, and they want to make it right, and they want to get better in those areas.
You mentioned deficiencies. Speaking of the defensive tackles that you kind of named off there, those 4 or so that were brought up, the one thing that they have across the board, the trait that is sort of the commonality across all 4, you see words like disruptive, you know what I mean? Like things that they absolutely need. It's not just filling the trenches. They know what they need from who they're going to put in those trenches. And it is pressure on the opposing quarterback. All these guys, they either have the physical trait or they've got sort of the urgency in their play to get after it and be, again, disruptive. I just saw that word time and time again with all the defensive tackles that were coming in they were looking at. Look at TJ Slayton. You're probably not going to, and maybe his draft profile is different, but if you were to look at adding him to this roster in free agency, which the Bengals did, disruptive might not be among the top words for Slayton. But these defensive tackles that they're bringing in, it feels like that's, again, a common trait, which I find interesting because it's a big
need.
They
need, it is. They need a guy that can get them off the field on 4th and 16, that can heat up Patrick Mahomes so he's not even able to throw that lob pass that he did and get the pass interference penalty. Like that, those are the downs, right? Get after Jaden Daniels on 2nd and 8 so they don't have a 3rd and 1, or on 1st and 10 to put them behind the stick so they weren't facing a 2nd and 2. Like they need that, whoever that guy is. And I think Walter Nolan very well could be that guy. There was a mock last week I did on a radio station and looked at everyone that had been off the board, and I'm like, who do I think the Bengals would take? Not who I would take, who I think the Bengals would take. And I took Walter Nolan. We'll see if that's the route they go. They're certainly interested in him. He's one of the many defensive tackle options that they'll look at ahead of the 2025 NFL draft. And you know what's crazy, Andrew, is as much as we talk about the draft, there's a much, much bigger conversation going on, and it involves Paycor Stadium. We'll get the latest on the stadium lease with Hamilton County. We'll discuss it coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He's Andrew Fox Miller. And the Bengals stadium discussions and lease with Hamilton County, well, it's getting not to the 4th quarter yet, Andrew. You have until June 30th, but the deadline is looming. And that deadline is simple. You want to get a deal done, a long-term lease agreement in place, so the Bengals don't have to potentially pick up one of their multiple 2-year options that they have. So they don't have to think about that. And the most recent developments, as the county and Bengals continue to have their discussions, is renovating the stadium. They're asking the state of Ohio for $350 million of an $830 million renovation project that would transform Paycor Stadium. But you have the county who wants to win their side of the deal. You have the Bengals who certainly don't want to lose their side of the deal. They want to win the deal as well. And we'll see if this gets done. But I think a lot of people are wondering about the stadium element of it. And it's a stare down. And I'm not sure things are great between both sides, but I do think that both sides hope to get something done before that deadline.
Yeah, it's very much like the Trey Hendrickson talks right now. Just business. That's how I'm looking at it. Just business. But I will say, I don't know what I'm going to be more tired of over the next week, James. Is it going to be the 500th mock draft I've seen in a 24-hour period, or is it mock designs of whatever the Bengals are planning on doing with the stadium? I mean, I don't know. I've seen so many variations. I don't know what it's going to end up being at this point. But as a fan, I like what I saw in this more recent one, and we can flash that up. Some of the tweets that went out there online, some renderings of what it might look like. It feels less like the concrete jungle that fans always refer to it as. I know it's improved over the years, but make me feel like I'm part of something when I'm at a game beyond just watching the product on the field. Give me a bit of an experience, and I like a lot more orange and black, a lot more photos of players past and present. It's pretty cool.
I think it's interesting that the county has released these renderings.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
It's not like the Bengals are like, hey, look at this. The county's like, hey, look at what we can do. And from my side of it, at least my point of view, the Bengals are like, okay, well, who's going to do it? And then the county's like, well, a mixture of everybody, including the state of Ohio. And the Bengals are like, oh, hey, yeah, state of Ohio. And we're still waiting on the state of Ohio. You have multiple political figures this week saying, yeah, it's a lot of money for stadiums in Ohio, because obviously they have the Brown Stadium and everything that's going on up 71 as well when it comes to the future of what they're going to do stadium-wise. Look, it's one of those things that it could get very real very fast. And I've had multiple people ask me over the past few weeks, are the Bengals going to move?
Yeah.
And my answer is no, I don't think the Bengals are going to leave Cincinnati. Is there a chance that they move from downtown? Well, I don't think they want to. Moving sucks. I don't think they want to go through that. And I don't think Hamilton County wants them to leave. But if they get to that June 30th deadline, and even if the Bengals pick up a 2-year option, I think that becomes a real possibility of them looking around the area, potential different counties in the area that would be willing to become the home of the Bengals. And you just don't want to get there. You don't want the business to get there, right? You don't want the Bengals to get permission to seek a trade. You mentioned Trey Hendrickson. Like, you just don't want to get there. You want it to be cleaner. So hopefully that happens.
Yeah, and it's always difficult. I know NFL as a product, it's very hard to lose. I mean, the retention is always going to be there. The growth is going to continue. It's always difficult to read into what is being said in those business discussions as a consumer, as a fan, because you start to feel as though it's being dangled in front of you. It's being threatened to be taken away from you. And if you've seen the headlines out there and some of the, the quotes that are being pulled, I feel as though it's more designed to give you that feeling as a fan, as a resident, in this case, of Hamilton County, speaking for myself, to look at it and go, okay, well, don't toy with my emotions on this. I mean, I know that there's some input from a county standpoint, a resident standpoint. That's when it starts to feel ugly, at least speaking from a fan perspective. I can handle business to a degree, but it's almost like Trey Hendrickson. Again, we keep using this as the analogy. He went out there and he said, whatever it takes for this team to win a Super Bowl, if that means trading me, trade me. And if that's going to give you success, great. That would be like Trey coming though and saying, hey, I don't know. Sure, I could leave. Maybe I will just leave. I don't know, and he's saying it to a group of people wearing his jersey. That's where it just feels a little off to me.
Sure. Yeah, I think I hope it doesn't get ugly. And yet these things can get ugly. How ugly, speaking of the stadium, did it get when the waters of the Ohio River surged up. We talked about this last week, wanted to revisit it before we wrap the show. Yeah, the Paycor Stadium flooding, everything outside, the player lot, all of the craziness. Very little water got in. Very little water got in. At the peak of it, I had someone that was inside the stadium, a couple people say, yeah, it's all good. You just can't come in that entrance. But the flood walls held strong, Andrew, which is great news for everybody.
All right. One could say the trenches did what they needed to do, right? We did okay. The big the floodgates.
Bengals are good in the trenches.
Yeah, that's right.
Dominant.
Yeah.
The flood walls protect Joe Burrow. Okay.
That's right.
There's something here.
Yeah, and he could have pulled that Batmobile right in through those gates, and it would have been fine. You mentioned people asking about what's going to happen with the Bengals in this city. It's sticking around, and the business, discussing things with the county. I feel like there were a lot of questions that I came across with people going, "Hey, is the field okay at Paycor? Is Paycor okay? I saw the pictures of the flooding, and there wasn't a lot of coverage since that was brought up."
Field's okay. Locker room's okay. Everything A-okay, which is great news. It's great news.
Your face.
Hey, I'm just saying. I thought you might have more to say. It's all right.
Oh, okay. More to say
is done talking, and well, that means I can talk. For Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening.